You ready, Ms. G?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'm calling to order the October 2nd, 2017 Planning Commission meeting. Can you please take the roll?
Mr. John?
Present.
Ms. Hockenberry? Here. Mr. Krasner?
Here.
Mr. Rankin?
Here.
Mr. Stevens?
Here.
Ms. Teets?
Here.
Mr. Wodisco?
Here.
Thank you.
All right. Full slate here, full attendance. All right, we're going to move all the way down to number 6. Well, actually, I'm sorry. We do have to adopt, John. I'm trying to move a little faster today.
I move that we
apologize.
adopt the agenda.
Second.
Second it.
Okay, there you go.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, all right. Well, let me see if there are anybody in the public who has anything they'd like to talk about that's not on the agenda this evening. All right. Did you get any petitions, Ms. G?
I have none.
Okay. All right, now we're at 6A, old business, staff update of Greenway Downs and Paper Streets.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, at our last meeting, you were interested in getting an update on these items, which the commission has spent a fair amount of time on, and at various points went to city council and then did not go further, even though there was a lot of work done. So the purpose of this update is just to give you literally an update of where we are on this. Paper streets and greenways, there is a copy of a report that was done that you should have in your package. And the purpose of this was to follow up on these areas on the city's future land use map that have been identified in our efforts to provide greater mobility and connectivity in our planning by designating these on the future land use map as greenways. As part of that, there would be a slight addition to the legend of the future land use map to call out greenways. As you're probably familiar, greenways are well established in many communities as a location for passage or buffers or connections that are not streets with cars and heavy vehicular traffic. And these paper streets and rights-of-ways are ones that the city wants to retain, but it has no plans to build as streets. So in many cases, they are used informally as a greenway or there's a pathway. And so there are some examples, I think, in the package that was put together in September of 2016 of what these can be. One example that was done was the historic Rolling Road property where we've achieved some maintenance, some cleanup, park benches, and some trash cans, and there's now a little historic Rolling Road street sign. Again, these are modest, low-cost things. The property is being maintained by the adjoining office buildings in terms of mowing and cleaning up. And so we also have included in your package an example of kind of the adopt-a-spot idea that we could encourage neighbors and property owners to take special pride in helping to maintain and keep clean and attractive some of these areas. The purpose of this going forward was first to simply put these blank spaces on the map and label them green, with the actual use of each area being something that would be decided later. But, and the Planning Commission in the past, there have been changes to the future land use map to make some of those areas green on the map. I think Cedar Street is one, Rothsay Place another. And so anyway, that's kind of where we were. Went to City Council for a variety of reasons, a lot of other work. It's kind of been on a pause. I know it's been of interest to the Planning Commission. So I can stop at this point, and if you have questions on the paper streets and greenways issue.
So let me say that having read this past weekend, this is all as I remember it. Mm-hmm. That we had put in a lot of work on this. At the time, we had a different a few different members of the Planning Commission at that time, but it was pretty much a unanimous support for putting this on the future land use map. And as this report indicates, we were pushing for this to be enacted by City Council. Your report says that the council requested additional outreach to adjacent property owners with additional information on how this replanning would affect property rights, such as setback requirements for sheds and outbuildings. So that seems to me to be the only hang-up on this moving forward, or is there something else that, because this seems obvious. It's within our rights, and it's within, it's what we support. So is the council just not willing to entertain this? Is that what I'm understanding?
I think one of the things that might be good is to have a conversation with council about how could this move forward? There are a lot of things trying to go forward on council agenda. We also were doing vision last year. There were a number of, we were doing streetscape. There were a number of special projects that we took on for the work plan of the council and for the city manager. It took a lot of staff time, to the extent that we now have time that we have to burn so that people don't lose their time at the end of the year. So we've got some constraints on staff time. I think it's one of the questions would be, I think, when is there room in the council agenda to come forward with this? I think there was interest also in maybe doing significant outreach to each of the owners on either side. That's a lot of effort. And so that takes a lot of staff time, and there are a number of these. So one of the things I would say that was in the multimodal plan and the connectivity plan, the Parks for People plan, we've shown these connections on different maps. So in many ways, this is simply putting it officially on what's even a simpler map, the future land use map. So personally, I think should be a very straightforward thing. We aren't trying to say there's going to be what's going to happen on these spaces, whether it's going to be a bike trail or just community space or just green space, but we are saying it needs to be noted as not a blank area. So I think perhaps discussion between the commission and the council as to when this could go forward would be in order, along with a couple of other items as well. Greenway Downs being another.
Okay.
There's a lot going on this fall with referendum, planning of the school area.
Yeah, so that's my fear, is that this is I would not imagine that controversial an issue, but there is a lot on their agenda, I already know, and then very quickly, once the new year starts, we're into the budget season for them, and it's harder to get things like this, and attention on this.
So
these type of
perhaps this
items.
could be a 2018 project in the second quarter of 2018, possibly.
Okay. I mean, my interest is in just getting this done. I mean, it doesn't seem, again, that controversial and just makes sense. We own these streets. So I'm going to let other people ask questions and who have not been part of this process or
Well,
have
I
other
just want to
comments.
make a suggestion. So if we make a goal of getting on the council's agenda in 18, in the meantime, should we not get the zoning administrator to maybe do a memo of how this might affect the sheds and things, so we actually have an answer to that question? And the second thing is we could have a public outreach meeting, even if it's just kind of like, maybe 15 minutes of talking, a little bit of an open house with diagrams and invitations going out to the adjacent landowners. And that way, if we did meet with council, we could have said that we did find out what would happen with sheds. We did reach out to those adjacent landowners.
And I think those are good suggestions. I think one of the things that has happened, these streets, if they're an actual street and they're being used, they become a requirement to have a front yard setback. And so in many cases, they're on a rear yard, or you may have some lots that might have
It would probably
three
improve.
frontages.
It would probably improve the situation for accessory structures.
Yes, it
because
would.
Because you no longer have something that's considered a street.
Yes.
Although just changing the land use map wouldn't affect that change by itself. I mean,
Well,
just changing the
one
land
of
use
the- one of the
designation.
examples, I guess, that you're getting at is in the places where the Planning Commission and City Council had made changes and made green on the plan, Cedar Street and Rothsay, I believe, were a couple, and maybe some others, that have been done in the past, and that's one of the reasons to do the others. there was a zoning administrator ruling or review and saying, we shouldn't apply, we won't apply front yard setbacks to these, because in some cases you had lots with 3 front yard setbacks, which, doesn't, and these were not streets that were ever going to be built or improved. And so to some extent, asking the more detailed question of, particularly with regard to garages or accessory structures is a very good one, and
Right.
we can follow up on that.
But just changing the land use map by itself wouldn't, unless the city vacates it and then puts it into some other type of, because when it's officially designated as right-of-way on the map,
Well, part of it, is it a street or not? And so
Right.
in the cases where we've made it green on the plan,
right,
the decision was, we're not going to have a street setback here. So
Right.
in a sense, that does get at that.
Right.
If we made these green, we treated them in a similar fashion to how Cedar Street's been treated, then it would not, you would not have that, 40-foot setback.
Right.
If it's an R1A or, it could be very constraining if you're surrounded by.
right. And I'd imagine in a lot of these situations, you probably have tons of nonconformities that have just been that way for decades because people didn't treat it as a street, even though,
Yes, I believe that's very true.
Right.
Yeah,
Those
most-
are very good observations.
Yeah, because most of the ones I use a lot, I don't think the houses next to it are treated as a front yard.
Right. And I think that's correct. They
It's
haven't
mostly
been in the past.
side
but
streets,
technically,
side
a
yard.
they are, no,
lot of it is a street, you could apply that.
right.
Lindy?
I agree with Melissa that we should have some sort of a announcement to the neighbors around these areas, because I do know that there are some infringements into some of these areas that are ongoing and longstanding that we might need to deal with, but I do think we need to make an announcement. Is there any way of calling them something else other than paper streets?
Well, one of the suggestions, and I think it was
streets
very
thing
good,
is-
was greenways.
Yeah.
So they would be called greenways rather than streets. And we would make a change in the legend of the land use map that would add greenways, parks, open space, and greenways. Again, that many communities use greenways as a technique, and it's on, it's a common, well-thought-through planning approach, land use and zoning approach as well.
Because this report's what, a year old now?
Yeah. I guess one of the concerns would be, we think simply keeping it simple and saying, let's make it green on the plan, perhaps resolving the questions that have been raised about structures that may be closer than 40 feet or 25 feet, depending on the zoning, which I think could be done. Where it gets difficult is if we get into every, there are many of these, every detail of every one, and then it gets to be a bigger issue that's going to take, it won't get done because there's too much
Right, I
too
mean,
many complications. So first step is we identify them on the connectivity, the parks plan, the mobility for all modes plan. Next step is make them green on the future land use map, and then decisions about what would happen on each site would be something would be done locally with the participation of the people who live there.
Right, you probably want to start with the sites that are larger, that actually connect, or that, there are a couple of these little slivers, but there are only 2 or 3 or 4 that actually kind of run for more than, a couple hundred feet or so. The Greenway Downs one, the one behind Lee Street, North Lee Street. Some of those actually, kind of go somewhere. The one over in Broadmoor. But anyhow, when you got to that point to prioritize, you'd probably want to start with the ones that have some potential to do something.
And we did identify them on guiding policy for future parks map. So they've been identified. We've put in some color on some maps. We just haven't gotten on a future
Yeah.
land use map yet.
And I think we can generally say that they're greenways, and so the expectation is that pedestrians and biking could happen on them. So one of the really small ones actually comes from the end of Villa Ridge on the Roosevelt. And why it's tiny, it's just basically between 2 housing lots, it's used quite a bit because that street doesn't connect. So if you want to come out of that neighborhood and walk down to Grand Mart or something like that, this is much quicker than if you went the long way around on the actual street. So even the small ones, and there's also a really small one on Tuckahoe that we use all the time in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
And again, it connects you to another neighborhood without going blocks around if you went by street. So even the small ones have some uses. And some of them have trails on them now.
Also, there's the potential for, perhaps neighborhood cleanup or maintenance of these, adoption of them, so that it doesn't become a big burden for the city, and that people care about the space, and, you know, it's kind of eyes on the green space.
Yeah,
I think
like,
it also adds it to our green inventory from Chesapeake Bay.
like I said, I think this is something that just should be moved forward. I know it's not the highest priority, but
So, can I just ask, so just so I'm clear, specifically, we're asking city council to approve this change to the future land use map.
Right.
And they said, maybe, can we have more outreach? So my question is, did they give very specific guidance, like actionable guidance? And if so, can we, I guess I'm saying, if they gave specific guidance, either we should take action on that guidance before we go back to them, or do something that we think is sufficient, but maybe not quite what they asked for, and then pester them again. And if they didn't give specific guidance, then maybe we just do something along the lines of their rough guidance. I guess what I'm saying is, unless we go and do outreach.
Agreed.
Or figure out what the
You got-
impact
you gotta-
is, there's no point in going back to city council, they'll just tell us to do this again.
Right. And the outreach, we shouldn't assume the outreach will be easy because, sometimes folks, they were okay when it was kind of like a little neighborhood thing that people knew about. Then
Right.
all of a sudden you tell them it's going to be a actual improved way.
Well, I'm
that-
sure if anyone
that
reads
open to
the
open to
letter,
the
they
public
will-
and
they will be
well-known, and now
okay.
you're going to get more people walking behind their house or this and that. There will be concerns. I mean,
Sure.
I think that would be.
I'm just saying, like,
So we
so the
shouldn't
next
expect-
step would be to figure out when staff has
Well,
time to do
and that's
it.
one of the reasons we've been trying to keep it simple, because these are public ways, they're public spaces now. We're not suggesting what's going to happen. to
Yeah,
them.
that-
Simply that we recognize they're not going to be streets. They're going to be green spaces.
Right.
And so it doesn't mean there's a bike trail coming through, or that those kinds of decision, or ped path.
Right, and that's what
those
the
kinds
outreach
of-
would have to
Yeah.
Right, and that's
explain.
where I would.
We're trying to keep it very simple.
While city council may want us to go have a one-on-one fireside chat with each resident, I would say we notify the adjacent residents, maybe have a public meeting that no one will come to. Then neither of those things should take too much time. Basically just present the stuff we already have to basically nobody, because no one's going to pay attention. Then go back to city council. They may say, no, we want more outreach, but we can at least pester them, say, hey, we've notified everybody, and we're not planning on doing anything. We're just changing the future land. It's like a baby step towards anything. I suggest we do that, because that shouldn't take tons of staff time. It may or may not satisfy
I mean,
council.
the way it is now, in theory, city, if it had money, could build the street.
Right.
yeah, we own
I
it.
think that's what we want to do. It's not where you want to spend money, and I don't think those streets are needed, and
Yeah.
those would be very open.
They can do any.
So let's do that. Jim, can you tell us at some future date when you believe staff has time in the schedule to do these outreach efforts, these minimal outreach efforts? I mean, what
It's
I'm saying.
definitely not until 2018. Because
Agreed.
right now, I'm having
Understand.
to have staff
Understand.
burn leave that they
Yep.
created doing all these special
But
projects.
let's as planners get a plan.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Just quick question, did the city council discuss this at an open meeting?
I believe it was a work session.
If you have
I
a date,
recall
maybe
it
we
was,
can go back and just
September
listen to it.
19, 2016, I believe.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
So I appreciate it's not till 2018,
Yeah.
just so that we can, again, get it on the calendar, because we talked about it for a couple of years, and then this just represents what we did in the last year. We've been talking about this for forever.
And I think it is very good work. I mean, I think
Yeah,
this is, and it matches with a lot of other plans that have been already approved that are making good use potentially of these spaces.
Yeah, and with a little foreshadowing, I think the same thing's the same request would be on the Greenway Downs, is let people ask them questions and get an update. But it's as we left it, from my opinion, and just again, some sense from you when we think we can address it, so we can get back on the city council's.
Definitely be 2018, not 2017.
Understood.
Now, Greenway Downs, should I go ahead with that?
That is the same agenda item, go for it.
Yeah, this is, again, we had done a lot of work. This came out of, for those of you who were involved or recall the ZOAC process, the Zoning Ordinance Advisory Committee, which targeted a number of changes, tweaks to the ordinance that should be made after the city did a very big comprehensive rework of their zoning ordinance and then put that on the shelf. One of the recommendations was to create a new zone, an R1C zone. As we looked at that, That's a very difficult thing to rezone all properties, create a new category. In reality, they're zoned R1B, but you have this contiguous area of lots that are somewhat smaller than the regular R1B. They were all formed by subdivision in the 1920s, and so they're very easily identifiable. And so a lot of work was done, and they actually was subdivided before zoning was in the city. So they have 20-foot building restriction lines rather than the 25 that's currently in the R1B zone in category. There are a number of variances that have been requested over the years. The typical thing that happens is someone in an older home, the building is 5 feet forward of the zoning setback line, and they can't put a second story on their one-story house. They can't put a porch on the front. And so it just has stymied the ability of people, particularly of existing homes, to redevelop or renovate their homes. So it kind of means that that's your only option if you want to, is if you're able to get a variance, or you knock the house down and you build something pushing it back to 25 feet, and so forth, so on and so forth. So there were a number of suggestions made to try to make it, make the lots work better. They're 50-foot lots. They currently have 10-foot setbacks on either side, so you can build a 30-foot house. That's the same setback that you have in the typical 60-foot lot for R1B. The lots are smaller, so we had some suggested ordinance changes, and those are included in here. There was a lot of mapping done to look at how many houses were non-conforming, so you can see on one of these maps, I believe it's attachment 7, all the stars. That's not a celebration. Those are all where the primary structures are not conformant. So this was to try to rationalize the situation, and a lot of these are side lot lines. They're too close, providing more flexibility. Again, this zoning ordinance amendment that was developed, it's got a lot of nuances. The biggest ones the biggest problems really have to do with front yard setbacks and side yard setbacks. And when it means that houses can't have front porches that are greater than 3 feet, which is not very useful. So there were a number of good suggestions in the ordinance draft that was done, and there were a number of illustrations that were created to try to show what could be done. So this would affect, we think, in a positive way, a large area of houses in the city that are all, subdivided in a certain manner, and would give people more flexibility. So that's the purpose of this.
Well, thank you. So I'm going to reiterate a little bit what I just said. This one's even more frustrating to me. As the date is on this document, this was a city council work session from May 21st, 2012. And really the staff put a lot of hard work into this, and those illustrations were very clear. I thought the recommendations made sense, and I thought we were moving forward on it. And what's disappointing about this one, not only how long it's sat dormant, but also that this affects a large number of people in our community.
Yes.
And we had done the outreach, and we'd had the meetings, and we had put together this plan, and I'm not sure why it didn't get finished. Like, what was city council's problem with this one, or if they just never found time on their agenda? I don't recall the history on that part of it. Do you recall?
I think some of it was timing, maybe some concern about what kind of reaction there would be. I know we had several listening sessions, and we had some sessions in Dogwood, focus groups. So I thought there was generally positives from the community.
Yeah, and these people, cannot make adjustments to their homes without.
It kind of
a
forces
very-
you into tear-down mode.
Yeah.
Which is expensive, because you can't live in your house while you're renovating. You can't add a second story.
How far, did the city council hold a work session on this? It sounds like they did. They held a work session. Then what happened?
Well, I don't think there was opposition per se. I think part of it's time and, worry. This is conjecture. Worry about what the reaction might be, and then time on the schedule.
Because I joined the BZA in 2012, and I remember
There are a bunch of these.
talking about this as coming as a solution,
Yeah.
and at that time, because the BZA does see a lot of variances in this neighborhood.
And of course, that's one of the classic reasons why you change codes.
Right.
And the ZOAC group had identified this as an area
ZOAC.
that could use a solution. We thought it would be much easier to tweak the code in R1B, which everything is already zoned, rather than, a mass rezoning of this would be very expensive, would be problematic, creating a new zoning code. Plus, it creates a kind of a lesser tier of, just the lettering A, B, C.
Yeah.
We're in the A, B.
No, this was a simplistic and elegant solution to this problem. These lots are non-conforming consistently, and they just by a little bit, and we can put an overlay district that solves this issue and reduces the variances and onus on these homeowners. This one should move forward once again.
Absolutely should.
And it's frustrating that we put in so much work, and by we, I mean you, put in all this work, that it wouldn't ultimately get its day to be heard and action upon, and have action on it. Does anyone have any questions?
We appreciate those comments. And this was an effort, along with the split lot work, to try to address some of the more problematic pieces of the zoning ordinance that ZOAC had identified, and this was one of those that affects a lot of homes.
Yeah.
I do have a quick question.
Yeah, do you think that this would necessitate another public hearing?
Well, it would have to be advertised, you'd have to go
Right.
to first reading on the ordinance amendment, so there would absolutely be hearings, yes.
No, one of my concerns is that over in that area, within this period of time, there's been so many remodeling projects, that perhaps could have been aided by this, and I hope it didn't put anybody in non-compliance by doing whatever they did. But this is absolutely ridiculous to spend this much time and not have it being pushed forward in all these years.
Even something as simple as saying, in this area, you can have a 20-foot setback instead of 25, just that simple change would be, that's one of the big problems. You can't put a second story on these, and you can't have a porch. And so, in a more compact neighborhood, houses close to the street with porches,
Right.
being able to go 2 stories with an addition is something that's within the reach of people who are in these homes and may want to remodel, or if they want to rebuild, so.
And practically speaking, people have been doing it by variance. That's how they've been doing it, one off at a time. But unfortunately, with the amount of time that's elapsed, there's been turnover. Now you'd have to you kind of have to start the process, not completely over, but you'd need to start the public outreach, because there are folks who either wouldn't remember it or weren't living there at the time, now they do, and they never heard of this. And so you'd need to, unfortunately, a lot of that work would have to be duplicated from 2012, because people it's been too long.
I agree.
Certainly would welcome any of the commission's comments on the details of the draft ordinance. It's got a lot of specifics.
We went over
It could be, we think it makes a lot of sense, but
Yeah. Yeah, I think,
It could
not
be
speaking for the newer members.
We've been there, done that.
This one met our requirements.
So I have questions and comments. First of all, I don't think I joined the planning commission until 2013, but I know we covered this when I was on it. So did anything happen, something happened between 2012 and now? I don't remember what or when, but
go back and look at the full
That's not
history.
super
This-
important.
This was a pretty complete package.
But
Gone.
now, like 6 months from now or 6 years from now, when someone says, "Where do things stand on paper streets?" I know the answer. The answer is that the Planning Commission wants the City Council to approve a future land use map amendment, and City Council wants more outreach. How do I get to a similar understanding of this? So we have, as a body, apparently years ago, approved a overlay district, and City Council would need to pass a ordinance that puts that into effect. They have not. Like paper streets, it's fairly clear what they want. Is it unclear what they want to move forward on this?
This was entertained by the commission and kind of put forward as a good idea that would address issues raised by ZOAC that the commission was aware of and the community was aware of. It never got formally adopted, but I think there was endorsement. This was a reasonable approach to the problem.
So is there action we need to take before City Council would ever take action?
Well, I think it would be good to try to figure out when could this happen. We need to be able to staff it. I think Mr. Krasner is right. There need to be some renewal of the outreach and reacquaintance with new people and existing people about the properties. And so that would take some effort. We'd have to plan that into our work plan.
Yeah,
I
so
think it's worthwhile. It certainly affects It's a code change that would affect positively and give more options to to a full neighborhood.
So let us know when in 2018 we can do this. You have the availability to do this outreach. These are not controversial, again, is my sense of it from 4 years ago and any other work we've done on it. So I appreciate this takes a long time to get moving, and I agree 100% with Mr. Krasner. We have to do the outreach again. The engineering doesn't have to be redone again. I think the solutions are still as valid as they were 4 years ago, but the community needs to be aware of what's.
One
what
thing,
we're
too, on
proposing.
each of these, if there is a commissioner or two who are particularly interested in helping on this or being somewhat of an ambassador, and I think there was in these, that's always helpful to us. If any of you have particular interest in being up to speed on this or helping, contributing, we're very open to that. Sometimes it's helpful for, when we have these meetings, and I think we ended up having a listening session here in City Hall. We couldn't get room in one of the schools, and we did it here. We had a pretty good turnout.
Well, let us know when when we can address it, and then I'll have a better sense of my willingness to be an ambassador. All right. Anybody else got any questions on this? Okay. You have something?
One other item that just wanted to just let you see it now is we've been talking for quite some time as a follow-up to the vision piece that was adopted, and also just an idea that's been around for a while, that we needed to develop a community profile. And so we are moving forward with developing a simple community profile that'll be published in January of 2018. It gives basic facts about the community as a follow-up to the vision piece. There was talk about this in the vision adoption. And so this is just a draft of what this will look like. We're going to add photographs and graphics and things like that. And we plan to publish this in early 2018, get feedback on it, and improve it each year. But we think this will be a very useful thing for citizens, for economic development, anybody coming to the community, for the chamber, our Office of Communications, just to have basic facts that are kept up to date, that are available in paper form or online in a variety of ways. So we've been working on this. Shelley Maestrin, who's been helping us, and Paul Stoddard and others have been working on this. So we think it's a good way to highlight and keep active the vision work. It was one of the recommended things that we might do. So we want to just give you the first look at where we're headed with this. This is something we're going to put together and publish in 2018. This is not the finished product, but it's first glance at what we're going to do.
Well, this seems like a very good idea. We just got it. I haven't looked
Yes.
at it. Do we refer to white as the race of white as white, or is that Caucasian on these forms?
I'll double check in terms of how it's handled on the census.
Yeah, I mean, the census says this population is predominantly white, and I just thought that was not the.
Yeah, I'll
formal
check
term
the
for it?
language in terms of how it's done with the census.
Is it the census? If it's a census term, then
I think it's a census term.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I thought it was
I
Caucasian.
think it's a census term.
Okay. I mean, I don't have much comment without having looked at it other than.
Yeah, and these things will get better with time. We don't have the graphics inserted. We probably want to have some maps on the back that show where everything is.
You need me to
in
pose
terms
for
of-
something? Is that?
I'm sorry?
Okay.
Not funny to explain.
Exactly.
My kids call that uncle humor.
Anybody have any comments about this? Mr. Stevens? No? Okay. Do we have any other old business that I'm unaware of? This structure that's going to come up later, right? Right. Okay, great. Okay, thank you. We don't have any new business, no other business, and we are all the way to the approval of minutes. I have read the minutes and have no comments. Anybody have a issue with them? All right.
I move that we approve the minutes.
Anybody have a second?
I'll second it.
All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I have to abstain. I wasn't here.
One abstention. All right, great, we are flying. Planning Commission reports. Any reports by planning commissioners? And I might add that the Redskin game starts shortly, so keep them quick.
I'm watching it delay, no spoilers. We had the economic working group meeting on Friday. You were there. Tim was there.
Sewers.
Talked about sewers. That was exciting. It's basically pretty much what we talked about, like utilities and right away, and talked more about when to rezone and whether not to rezone.
Yeah, I think the main topic as it related to this group was the rezoning issue, and that conversation began again. I wasn't at the previous meeting,
was
but
the same as the last
sounds like we had the same conversation. So there seems to be some real disagreement on the economic working group whether we should zone it B2 now or just let the applicant or do what they were calling was a PUD maybe agreement. There were some other suggestions about how to handle this issue and whether it should be done before or this should be done
Yeah.
at the time of the application,
I
which has not been resolved in my opinion.
Right, and I didn't ask about, maybe just since Jim's here, like, isn't this something that the consultants could advise us on? I mean, it seemed like a pretty technical question about what would be a better
In my
lever
view,
in
we need to
negotiating.
rezone it ourselves, and it could follow the land use plan. I mean, there could be a pause between the land use planning and the zoning, but we should zone it ourselves because it needs to be zoned. That's an appropriate thing to be done after you've planned it. You know, I'm not in agreement that we should have the applicant rezone it. There are these proffer issues that we went to great lengths to create the revitalization areas on the map in the comprehensive plan to make sure that we retained our ability to have proffers or voluntary concessions. So, you know, I think we're getting there in terms of the idea of making it more certain for people. So we're working with staff and the city attorney to preview these things and be ready if and when the referendum is
Yeah, that was my
approved.
feeling also.
Yeah,
is-
we're trying to be ready
Right.
in the event the referendum is positively approved by the voters.
Yeah, if the referendum passes and there's like immediate interest in the from developers, then I think that will dictate a lot of what we do because it'll be more clear what needs to be done.
We don't see a lot of risk since we own the property.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, well, there seems to be some differing opinions about that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I don't
But
think we need a new zoning category.
I'm not sure that's been in much dispute at this
Tweaking
point.
the B2 is the most efficient way.
I think that's
Mr.
agreed.
Chair, I know that there's some opinions about it, but I do think it's a purview of the Planning Commission. I think we need to move forward on
Well,
what we think is best.
certainly the zoning is the purview of the commission. However, there are a couple of risks, and we just need to make sure, it sounds
Right.
like if we're checking with the city attorney, and we do have an
Absolutely.
issue of proffers that are of concern, and, you know, what can and cannot happen, it is not something I think we should just move on without very careful
Oh, I
consideration.
agree with you,
But
but-
I don't think,
I think you know what I'm referring to.
yeah, sure, but I don't think the question of whether it should be a B2 has been questioned at all. That seems to be understood as the right way to go with some overlay, revitalization district or some overlay district that allows us to put in some more additional density if we need to. But the timing does seem to be an important issue that needs to be reviewed. And if anybody who's paying attention to the City of Falls Church and the people who are going to be involved in that decision, we have signaled very clearly our willingness to be flexible in that area. So if it was an issue of signaling, I think we've already done a good job. And once the referendum passes, or I should say if it does, then we would take additional steps to sort of indicate that this is what our thinking is at the time.
Yeah, whether, until the issue of the zoning gets resolved, that shouldn't delay moving ahead with the small area plan, right? Which is another vehicle for signaling what it is that we want.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, so we're not moving forward on that until the referendum, or that's moving in tandem?
We're going to wait and find out what the voters say. If they endorse the bond issue, then we would move forward with the land use and zoning piece of this, and then that might be followed by zoning, and those could be incorporated into the final approved small area plan. But you can't build that high school unless you replant or rezone it, so.
So we can can we rezone just the school portion, or do we have to zone the whole thing? Because, I mean, if you don't have to do
You
that at the
could.
same
I
time.
don't think it, I think it'd make more sense to zone it all. We also need to do the parcel consolidations, the land adjustments, and create the parcels for the school, parcel for development, that needs to happen.
Yeah, that has to
And that's a
happen
planning commission.
yeah, that has to happen no matter
That's a
what.
subdivision requirement.
But the zone, if the,
I would zone the whole thing.
okay,
That would
because
be
we
my
have more time if we don't have to do it all at the same time. Because the school's got to happen right away, but then you have all this time during that school demolition or construction and then
I think
demolition.
to Mr. Rankin's point, because if the voters do endorse this, the more certainty you can provide someone who's thinking about paying money for the privilege of developing it, they want to know what it's zoned, what I can do on it. And that's been something we've heard consistently from the consultants, everyone we've talked to, people need certainty. And, unless it's actually been done, you don't know for sure what it's zoned. If it isn't zoned, it isn't zoned. Right now, it's zoned single family, so.
Yeah, well, again, this is needs for a
repeat of
much
what
more
we-
substantive conversation on this, because I think it's more nuanced than that. I think the developer would know what we were looking for by the RFP and all those different things, but we have to just assess these risks, and if we're talking to the right people and understand the risks with the timing, then we can make a decision on that. So it's definitely our purview, and all those other steps have to occur as well, so.
Yes.
That and sewers was the discussion at the Economic Working Group. A lot of sewer
And
talk.
surveying the property, making sure we know what we have.
Correct. But the survey stuff was going to proceed regardless of the referendum, right? I thought
I
some.
believe they are.
Yeah.
They need to do this regardless.
But then everything else was going to wait until the voters had said what they want to say.
And have they done any borings yet?
No.
I don't know. I think there were ones done with Mary Ellen Henderson. I don't know specifically that answer that question. But
Because they keep saying that they're going to do some, just to see what anybody's dealing with.
City hasn't,
there.
the schools may have.
Yeah, my impression was that they had not.
There's a lot of talk about what, at least for the commercial site, what should we bother doing or not, because the developer would end up not trusting our work anyway. So on the school side, they have to do stuff if we're going to build a school. But there was debate about whether or not it would be valuable at all for us to do certain studies on the other side, because they would just redo them.
All right. If no one has any other comments, do you, Mr. Snyder?
Very briefly, just let you know that November 2nd, there's going to be a session at COG that the mayor has been working on as president of COG this year, and I've been working on with COG staff at the planning director level to have a region-wide focus on the metro stations and how do we encourage development of underused metro stations in the region. Urban Land Institute and others may be involved in that. So it's trying to bring together regional planning and elected officials along with Metro and others to see what we can do to make sure that we're getting the most out of the stations and the areas around the station. So that's planned for November 2nd. Also, we're talking with the housing office. They're going to do fair housing training in the spring. And so we'd like to make sure that, we'll let you know when that's going to be, but we'd like to make sure that commissioners have the opportunity to take that training. It's very comprehensive, and it's important to know more about it. So that was one of the things we talked about at our last planning directors, housing directors meeting was, let's make sure that our elected and appointed officials who have responsibilities for development and housing are up to date and well-informed as to what the rules are and what fair housing is all about.
All right.
So how many days is this training, or how many hours?
I don't know. I will check, but I think it's going to be in the spring.
The
So I
spring.
wanted to give you a heads up. We'll give you good heads up as to when it's going to be, but they were interested in, they'd love to have the commissioners involved.
Okay.
That's the only report I have. Thank you.
All right, great. For everybody's knowledge, after this meeting is adjourned, which will be momentarily, we are going to be discussing 3 topics. So don't change the channel. We're going to be talking about Railroad Avenue Cottages site plan update. Then we're going to do the public art project, Star Tavern and other. And then the Vietnamese American Friendship Memorial Project. Do we have an order that we want to do that in? That makes sense based on the attendance here? Do we have a sense of how long each of these are going to take? Because if some of these are like the shorter, like the Vietnamese American, that may make sense to let those people present.
Really at your pleasure, I think about 15 minutes apiece, I'm guessing. Falls Church Arts, you guys were about 15 minutes?
So, what's the expectation on the railroad cottages? I've looked at the materials, but what the discussion and,
Well-
my sense is that one's a lot longer than the others.
Could be. It's really a chance for the applicant to give you an update. They filed the site plan, they filed, I believe, the consolidation plat. We've begun to get some comments in from staff about the site plan, but, it's their chance to give you an update on where they are. Also, Carly Aubrey is here from staff. She's a Kansas City Chiefs fan.
I saw that. She will not be addressing us this evening. You may leave.
So, at any rate, but your pleasure, really.
My sense is I think the two art projects should go before the railroad cottages. So I think my thought would be to do the public art project, Star Tavern, and then the Vietnamese American Friendship, and then move to the railroad.
Okay.
Does anybody have any comments about about that in terms of that order? I think those are just shorter topics, and we can get those
Should we
volunteer
unveil-
projects out of the way before the
And we appreciate, this
commercial
was a
ones.
good meeting to be able to, for these folks collectively have been interested in getting commission's reaction to some of these good ideas, so
Okay.
this was a good meeting to be able to
All
do
right,
some of
any
this.
other comments? Otherwise, I'm going to adjourn the main meeting. All right, we're adjourned. Let's move right into it, except for Mrs. Aubrey, who needs to take off her name tag. Yeah, so let's start with the public art project.
Mr. Chairman, you have pictures and some write-ups.
Yep.
I believe we're going to pull the veil off of the,
So that we can show
It's on there, man.
Hi, I want to be really brief here. I'm Barb Cram, and I live at 212 East Jefferson Street. I think we're supposed to announce it every time we speak. I've lived here for, 35-some years, and I've been with the Arts and Humanities Council since its inception and Falls Church Arts. And 3 years ago, Andy Yoder, who's to my right, who's a public artist, and I got together because we had a lot of outcry for public art at that time. And we've been working and presented to a site-specific piece that was presented to developer, and they were to give us an answer in January. We didn't hear anything by June, so we started going public. We went to EDA. This is our second meeting, and then we're also meeting with Arts and Humanities Council on the 19th, and anybody else who wants to meet with us. What we're trying to do is get the conversation going on the public art process that suits the city. And so we have outlines, plans, and that sort of thing. Keith, could you come up in case? Keith, the president of our Little City Catch Foundation, and he also worked on this with us. And we'll have some questions, but Andy is a public art artist, and there's a big difference because the scale, the engineering that's required, the budgeting, the meetings that are required with the contractors. We've met with all the local contractors, Dixie Sheet Metal and about 6 others, and we've really done a thorough study of this. The presentation is made because in our meetings, we wanted to do something that was unique to Falls Church, and Andy's going to go through this. I just want to tell you what a special guy he is and invite you to go to his website, andyyoder.com, and find all the wonderful places. He's been reviewed in the New York Times, the Village Voice, Wall Street Journal, and just is a really top-notch artist. So we're really lucky that he lives on West Street, and he has 3 children in our local schools. So I've enjoyed working with Andy for the past 3 years, and we really want to get some feedback from you all, more than anything else, and I'm sure Keith has a comment about that. But I'll stand back and let these two take over. You want to say a word or two?
Thank you. Keith Thurston, 1015 Birch Street. We've looked at public art policies of different jurisdictions, Alexandria, Arlington, Reston, and I heard of one today from Vienna has a new one. We'll take that one into consideration too, to try to see what the key issues are that need to be followed in those kind of policies, and have one for Falls Church, which we presently do not have. We do get public art in when a site plan goes through the process, but if you try to add something later, it's kind of an unknown process that we want to be able to articulate, and that everybody knows what routes we need to follow. Andy's been working on this for some time. It's been shown to different possible developers, and maybe other possibilities of where to place this one. It's a good one to look at to go through the process first, because it can show you what it can do. It kind of relates to Falls Church strongly in its history. So I'll leave it to Andy to show the overall things that he has to offer.
Unveil the model? Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Hi, Andy Yoder, 1411 Southwest Street. I'm a public artist. I'm also a site-specific artist, which means that I don't have a suitcase of sculpture that I bring to every place I go. I build my ideas off the existing history and the characteristics of the site. So when I looked at Falls Church, it struck me that here's a place that has a phenomenal history. It's in the shadow of the mall with all its monuments. But yet, if you drive through Falls Church, you really aren't aware of its history. And it also has this amazing location at the traditional crossroads of the city, where it just so happens there used to be the Star Tavern that had a pole out front with a green glass star marking it, and it became a local landmark. So I decided that the star would be a good symbol for the crossroads of the city. And also, one of the things that makes Falls Church such a special place is it's also a crossroads politically. It's a place of inclusiveness and tolerance, and it's been that way historically and up until the present day. In the Civil War, you had the North and the South crisscrossing through the city and occupying it. Afterwards, it had to figure out a way to reconcile those two opposing forces within not just the military that had come through it, but also the way it was split within the city. So you have this north and south star intersecting with the east and west facing star, and they're riveted together so that the rivets, I'll just hold it. But it also has a look to it, a historic look, that to me it reminds me of the Monitor and the Merrimack. It has a built-in sort of substantial, handmade kind of look. And the same holds true for the Statue of Liberty, which is the same thing. It's a copper skin over a structure. So there's
You're going to walk around talking to this so the TV can hear you.
Okay. So this is the reason this sculpture is green is because it's constructed out of copper. When copper is exposed to the weather, just like the Lady Liberty, it gets this green patina. But we would be able to fabricate this and put the patina on right away, so it wouldn't just gradually be turning brown and then gradually green. It would be fabricated by Dixie Sheet Metal, which is one of Falls Church's oldest businesses. And the other part of this is that it would be funded by private donations. If you see in the model here, these are donor stars, so that businesses, private individuals, families, in memoriam or just out of support for the city and its history, would donate money for the cost of the star. it would also have the function of creating a focal point at the city's crossroads. So in other words, in New York City, you go to Grand Central Station, meet me at the Star. Once you meet at the Star, then you go off and you go to eat or drink or do something near that location. So if you, I'm sorry, at the Clock in Grand Central Station. So if you meet at the Star, I think in the New Year's Eve, we've had the words LOVE there. And people get very excited. It becomes something to look forward to. This would be lit at night from below, built into the masonry base. It would create a gathering place with the benches around there. And there's a proven track record for arts as an engine, an economic engine, for its location. It makes the location around it a more desirable place to be. And it also sets a message out to the world that Falls Church is a very special place with this incredible history, but it's also a place that values its history and that cares about how it's perceived. When a major corporation is looking around for places to build or develop, it makes that decision based on the sort of cultural life and profile of a city. Is one of the major reasons it's going to decide to do something there, because it's going to have employees there. It wants it to be in a place which is happening. And the cultural life of a city is a major factor in those decisions. So all these things sort of combine to go into this piece. It's a history marker. It plays off the North and the South, the conflict during the Civil War. General Eisenhower was down the street when he was planning D-Day with his 5 stars. The inclusiveness factor, the first rural chapter of the NAACP was built here. So in a way, it symbolizes the way that it brought those kind of tensions into a place where people could tolerate those kind of things. So that is the gist of the idea. We have this thing, but it is ideally located right where that Star Tavern was. But and that's private property. But hopefully with enough goodwill from everyone concerned, if it doesn't go there, it could go somewhere else.
Here's a photo here. I think this was taken in the location that is proposed for those of you that saw that.
Yeah, that would be the scale. The base is 7 feet tall, and the Star itself goes up 15 feet, so the total height is 22 feet, which sounds like a lot, but when you put a sculpture outside in space, it has a way of shrinking very dramatically. So unless it's good size, it's just not going to look significant enough. But being lit at night, it would really, I think, be a beacon and a connecting link to some of the development that looks like it's headed that way for that area. As it is now, it's just sort of it's an empty space. I believe the developers told us that they like the idea very much, but they're thinking about redeveloping that building and thought that might. Right.
They're going to redevelop the George Mason Square? Is that what we're?
They wanted to keep their options open.
Right.
I haven't mentioned it to me in my 10-year lease, but that's
No, it's funny because the Dixie Sheet Metal did the awning for the 4 provinces, and they love, everybody I presented this idea to, they catch on. It doesn't take me explaining it to sort of get them to be enthusiastic about it. And Dixie said, we'll buy a Star right off the bat, for sure. And it's something that I think, well, you had stars on both the Union and the Confederate flags. It's a symbol that you see people putting on their homes. It seems like a sort of an all-purpose and upbeat kind of a thing. It has a sort of a uplifting kind of a feel to it, I hope, and it has a traditional feel to it. But yet it's a piece of contemporary public art. So that's
The Star has continued to be a symbol for Falls Church. It was on the city's water tower for years. That was behind the Women's Club, and then when the watch night was begun, it's been annually the item that's been raised, and that actually is the Star that came off of the water tower that we raise every New Year's Eve.
So, well, thank you very much. I think personally, I like the way it looks, and while the scale looks very large, I trust that you understand those dimensions quite well and how it will fit in with, human interaction and things like that. But I'm curious, before I open it up, in terms of like, what the next steps are. We're being just presented for information at this point. How does this move forward? Is it stopped because George Mason Square wants to keep their options open? I'm just not sure where we're headed to make this a reality.
So two things. One is the specific placement of this piece of public art. The second piece is to get the public art policy procedure in place, which we're working with Jim to do, and we're modeling that off of the surrounding communities. So that will be coming forward to you, and once a specific location is identified, this may be one of the first items that comes through the process. If we find a location for it that's willing.
So are we
We're
talking?
hoping that George Mason Square and Atlantic Realty will be evolving by that time. It's been a long time.
Yeah. So are we talking months, or are we in years? I mean, what's the?
Well,
this-
we're talking about a number of months for the policy, 2 to 3 months for the policy. We have more work to do with developers and location to figure before we know where this is going to be placed.
Okay. All right. Anybody?
FYI at this point to get the conversation going.
Yeah. Any other commissioners have comments, questions?
One question is, I guess maybe we can put this in the policy as well, but so what type of public outreach will we be doing in terms of introducing this design? I guess we're going to wait till we're closer to when we have a location, or?
We did the EDA and then you all, and now we're doing the Arts and Humanities Council, and I mean, we're happy to present it, as long as Andy has time to present, just so people are aware.
But once a location is decided, there will be hearings, so they'll be advertised, and obviously Arts and Humanities and perhaps the
Right.
Planning Commission. So that will be done, and obviously, we will do legwork beforehand to socialize that in the community
Right.
before it went for an official hearing.
Thank you.
Mr. Krasner?
I mean, with all due respect, isn't it a little premature if you don't know the location? I mean,
Well, we did know the location. We designed it for George Mason Square.
but now you're saying George Mason Square doesn't want it.
No, they haven't said they haven't wanted it, they just haven't responded yet. So if the redesign goes on and they want to have it, I mean, that could happen.
In fact, their executives were very positive about it.
They really liked it a lot.
It has to do with if we get an easement onto the property or it's dedicated land where we put it, because actually the city's
owns 5
right-of-way
feet.
is very narrow
5
Right.
at that point. All of that brick that you see, except the trees right on the curb, all that other brick is private property.
Sure. All right, well, I just feel like if that doesn't work out, then, you might be looking at, because the space is so important to whether the art will work there.
Right.
And if the space is still, I mean, maybe it's more certain than you're implying. It seems like you're implying that it's still up in the air. And you may not know for many months or longer.
When we were trying to push the public art process along, actually.
Right, no, I think that's a very worthy endeavor to continue to get the public art policy in
But we'd
place.
like to have a piece to talk about, it makes it easier.
I see. So this was just kind of like a sample.
Yeah,
I see.
but we hope it's the sample.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, this has been presented to the EDA, and I believe you all are looking to go to the Arts and Cultural Humanities Group, is that correct? If I've got the language right?
It just seems to me the most important thing here is to get a public art process, because we talk about public art, we've been talking about it for decades. So perhaps if we had a policy, it would be easier to move forward with some of it.
I like it. Andy came by my office a few months ago and gave me the rundown. I thought it was cool. If this is private property, could they, I mean, I think it's a good idea to have a public art policy, but could they not just put this here if they just wanted to? I mean,
The
they
issue
got the
becomes,
pig statue up at the Volvo place, right? I'm just curious what the actual rules are.
actually, if it were donated to the property owner, so that becomes an issue. If it's public art and it's been donated by the community, then is it owned by the city, the community, or is it given to the developer?
Got it.
Of course, the property owner wants to own everything that's on their property unless they're giving us a public easement to that front piece, and that's what we'd have to
Okay.
talk about.
Yeah, and I think it'd be great to have that. I'd love to see more art around town, like murals,
About chalk walls.
I was in Ann Arbor for Memorial Day, and they got murals everywhere. It's so cool. I wish we had more stuff like that.
Well, visually, it's very appealing. I really like the design. Sounds like we got a few steps in the process before it becomes a reality, but on first glance, and I like that it has meaning and fits Falls Church specifically. So my personal opinion is it's a wonderful suggestion, and hopefully we can make it a reality. All right, thank you. Okay, so now we are going to move to the Vietnamese American Friendship Memorial Project. Thank you very much.
Some of y'all may not have met Bob Smith, but I wanted to introduce him to the commission tonight, in case you haven't met him. We had a wonderful presentation, obviously just a second ago, on the history, the importance of history in our city, culture, diversity. Well, we have another outstanding opportunity to embrace a very significant population that exists primarily at the Eden Center, but at the eastern gateway of the city. And as some of y'all may know, we received a significant easement from 24 Hour Fitness, where Hillwood and East Broad meet at kind of the point before you get to Route 50. And so I'm going to let Bob take over and just share his vision and introduce some of the Vietnamese community here. But I'm excited about this, and just am very grateful that we have an opportunity not to have a war memorial, but a friendship peace memorial. So Bob, I'm going to let you present.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity to come before you. I'd like to introduce Dr. Haisi Ta and Bebe and our architect. Don't ask me to get into the saying of some of the names in Tan Nguyen. This is the leadership, the current leadership of the Vietnamese American community. And they've been working with us over the years, along with many, many others. For those that aren't really aware of it, the Greater Falls Church Veterans Council formed in 2004. Mayor Gardner was one of the founding members, and we became a civic organization here in Falls Church, where we do, working with Parks and Recreation, we put together the Veterans Day ceremony and the Memorial Day ceremony. And for Barb Cram, we participated in the parade this past year, which was a wonderful parade. We got a first place recognition, so thank you very much there. And I think the greatest thing we did over the past decade was the 7 individuals that have died in the war over in Afghanistan and in Iraq. Individually, we brought the families out here in the years where the death occurred. And then finally, we had a major event where we posted dedicated plaques on the wall across from the memorial and had all the families here, and we took them over to the Best Western Hotel on Route 50. That was all complimentary of Dave Krantz from who is one of the owners of that. And we also have pulled together all the veterans in the community. The council is comprised of members of the American Legion, which was Post 225 and Post 130. For the VFW post up in at the end of town behind the McDonald's. I served as commander there for 6 years, and of the Catholic War veterans and of the Republic of Vietnam soldiers. And so this is, and we even had the Korean War veterans for a while, but this is what we're composed of. Essentially, we have a little over 500 members. And not that they're all old enough to get out here and make it to a lot of the events, but they're here. And we always have around 100 individuals that always attend. I asked the crowd one day, how many of you are veterans, and had them stand up, and how many were related to veterans and stand up. And then I asked how many had no relationship to a veteran but was here to honor them. There was none. That's an issue that's got to be worked on, and so we're trying to do something about that as an organization. One of the ways to do that is to recognize the friendship that we have, but not to take a war stance. We don't want to glorify war. We are the soldiers. We fought in the war. We all experienced some things that were not very nice, but we don't want to sit there and make that something that everybody should say, yeah, we should go out to war. We wanted to say that peace is what it's all about. And so we have a large Vietnamese community. I think the last number I heard was about 85,000 that had settled in this area. And I think the Asian population from the demographics that I saw this last time was about 12%, up from about 6% about 17 years ago. And so we thought that it would be wonderful if we could put together, pull together the resources just up from the Eden Center and place that monument right across there by the 24-hour fitness. We'd like to create a monument that's an educational monument, something where the local schools would be able to bring the students out. There's plenty of room to drive a bus up there and set the bus, even 2 buses can sit on the one side. And that way the students can come out and take a look at it. And the concept at this point is perhaps a Vietnamese soldier and an American soldier standing with the Vietnamese flag, and down below would be some children. And the children would be sitting on a pedestal that had the name of each country that were allies during the conflict, but they would be told about the peace and about the country and about their heritage that they had. And we thought this would be a very appropriate way to express our friendship and would continue to do so. And by the way, on Sunday we have our annual Veterans Picnic right out here at Cherry Hill Park. And everybody here is invited. Please come. Again, Dave Kranz pays for it all, comes out here, does all the cooking, and makes it very possible for the veterans to get together. We have live music, we get up underneath. And you guys would really have a real good time and see how that friendship works in this community. Any questions you might have?
Thank you very much. So where is this in the process? Is this similar to like we just heard as sort of FYI?
2 years ago, we started getting together and we formed a committee, and I think 23 members originally. And we set up a committee to find a location, and a committee to sit back and do fundraising, and a committee to talk about what the design will be. So we've gone as far as we can, but the first thing was you can't do much until you know what your location size is going to be, how big the monument is, which is why I love what you've got. I'm hoping that goes forward. I really do. And we would like to place it right on that corner. And on the outer edge, we talked about it, putting a sidewalk, because right along the 24-hour fitness is a bus terminal, and there's really not a sidewalk that makes it over there. And from that part, we can wrap it completely around the gateway and include that as part of the project. I think that'll save a few dollars for the council as well.
Mr. Chairman, just in terms of the work by the Planning Commission, Mr. Chairman, when the site plan amendment was brought forth with 24-hour fitness, was noted that that particular site is on the comprehensive plan as a gateway location.
Right.
And so as a part of that, there was a piece of property negotiated and designed into the upper parking lot area. It's about 900 square feet, so it's rather large. There's electricity that goes there. There was a $5,000 contribution from 24-hour fitness towards something to happen up there. Unfortunately, nothing really has gone forward in terms of a specific proposal, although we've talked about the love statues and various ideas. One other thing that could happen here is in our discussions with Fairfax County about the redesign of the Seven Corners intersection.
Yeah, that's what I was going to.
One of the things the city has been advocating for and was accepted, I believe, was the idea of closing Hillwood Avenue, where it hits the Route 7 area, to make the intersection not so confusing, and also to help limit the through traffic on Hillwood that presently uses Hillwood as a cut-through. So there may be additional square footage of green space or connectivity on the Hillwood Avenue side, if and when that comes to pass. This kind of came about through a chance conversation at a 7-Eleven with, I believe, Harry Shovlin,
Right.
who was saying you guys were looking for a site,
And then we had our
Whatever,
meeting, and
yeah.
he brought that, he said, hey, this
so
is
you
it.
never know what you're going to find out when
Yeah.
you see someone at the 7-Eleven, so.
I mean, we've got lots of pictures, which I'll share some of them with you if you want, if your other site doesn't work, because we look for other sites too. But there's no question, being right up from Eden Center, that makes it very convenient for us to sit back and have our ceremonies and honor ceremonies going on at that site too, with the adequate parking.
So because it's a gateway site and the commission has a role in this, and they've been looking for an opportunity to go beyond just talking about it, we felt it was appropriate to come to you first and make sure that you were aware of this and get your feedback on it. And of course, you were involved in the site plan for 24-Hour Fitness.
And as an aside here, I think it's an important aside from what you said a minute ago. We figure our budget to be about $250,000. We don't even hesitate to think that if we needed to raise that, we could raise the money. The money's easily forthcoming. And there are some wealthy individuals that are ready to back it up right away. So, but we want to try and reach out to the community, and of course, we want all of our veterans to contribute and the community to contribute. And we'll go into a full-scale fundraiser with the fundraising committee. So we're in place with all the people ready to go. The Vietnamese American community, they meet up on Route 50, and we meet in over in Parks and Recreation every other month, and we'll be meeting again in November. But one thing we would like to have would be some kind of a document that says that, yes, this is a project that's ongoing with the city in cooperation with the city, so that we can go to our benefactors, our donors, and get the money so they can see that's legitimate. There's too many scams out there too often when people do fundraising. Just look at what's going on right now with all the hurricane business. We want to have such a document from the city showing our relationship with the city. And if we've got that, we can start fundraising the very next day.
Okay. Do we have any comments?
Yeah, I was just wondering, are you going to take this city council also?
Oh, I think that's essentially where we're
that
going
the
to have
next
to go
step?
with it, yes.
So, Mr. Snyder, do you see this as something that would have to go through this art policy, that we need this art policy first as well?
I think it really, because it's the gateway site, is reminding them that there's specific rules in the charter, like
Right,
this would set up a reminder
okay.
piece, and it's a patient. So we haven't done a lot of these before, so it's a little bit of trying to figure it out as we're going ahead. We thought the planning commission would be the right first step. Surprise you with it, you would have been the ones who approved that site plan or aware of the comp plan issues.
So do you see this as something where the planning commission would have a public meeting that would recommend it to the council, and the council would do a proclamation, or how? mean,
I don't,
Outside of,
Yeah.
I mean, we have language in the code that talks about the planning commission being, purview over public art and things like that, but not, there really isn't a specifics of how they're supposed to do that.
that's correct, and it probably needs to find time on the city council's agenda for at least a work session kind of presentation, so they can become familiar with it. I think there's some informal knowledge of this by various council members, and perhaps you all
Well,
can
Mary Beth Conley and
elaborate
I
on
have had
that.
some conversations about it, and Mayor Tarter, and so they're aware of it, and of course, Mary Beth Conley's standing right with us on it.
Yeah, no, it's a very good location. I guess the other thing is, obviously, that we need some public outreach, but also some outreach to 24-Hour Fitness as well. While they mostly use that front parking lot, they do have parking in the back that they use, and this could be, it'd be good if they're comfortable with it.
I guess one of the questions for the commission tonight is, are there reasons why you'd think this would be an inappropriate possibility for this site, or is it a possibly appropriate? facility on this gateway site.
I think it's a great site. Like you said, it's close to Eden Center, and it's a high-traffic area, so there'll be a lot of visibility for it. And a lot of people sit there for a long time, so they probably can read the signs while they're waiting for the light to turn.
And with the benches, everybody from the 24-hour fitness and other nearby businesses could probably sit there for lunch.
Right, I know 24 Fitness has done stuff with veterans in the past, too.
Yes.
And I believe, like, some of the people who started it were veterans, so I would imagine they would want to be involved anyway, but it's just good to do that outreach.
I think the only concern I would have would be, I mean, if it's a gateway site, I mean, that's, there's a lot, it's kind of a, there's a lot of implications to that. I don't know what our comp plan specifically says on that topic, as far as, it's serving as an entrance point to the city. And, is it going to say anything about Falls Church? What do we want to say at the gateway? I mean, not that this isn't a very worthy issue to memorialize, but is that the best spot for it? I don't know. Maybe that's what the public outreach is for. I just don't know what other options there might be for that site, what was envisioned. Are there any other, that is a major gateway passed by thousands and thousands of people every day entering the city. So that's the only question I have. Maybe this is the best option.
I would say that the emphasis is on friendship, and if nothing else, at the gateway, we would be emphasizing friendship. And this is a city that has recognized its citizens regardless of race or background, and it's been a very friendly city, and it's going to continue to be. That would be the educational emphasis of it. Please come here to find friends. And in some of the inscriptions, the little plaques that we would have sitting around, these would be little educational vignettes that could emphasize that without any question.
I think the other potential is if there's a larger site resulting from the eventual redesign, reconstruction of the Seven Corners intersection that turns the easternmost portion of Hillwood Avenue into green space and pedestrian space, that could give you a broader area to do this and possibly something else as well. Right now, it's kind of a very well-used cut-through site that complicates that intersection. And so I think we could have more of a green entry point to the city, whereas right now we have kind of the remnants of a traffic island.
Yeah, the question that I have is, can the project wait for that development to take place? Because it looks like it's maybe 5-6 years away.
I think the positive feature of this is that the area that was created is about 900 square feet, so it's a pretty good sized piece that was put together in the redesign of the parking lot up there. So it's relatively large, and it looks like it would accommodate this generally.
And that
so we're
5,000
fortunate in that sense. It's not as confined as some sites might be.
The $5,000 that I understand is sitting there could stay there, and if there is a redesign of the area, perhaps it could be used at that point to relocate it as necessary to fit into another plan. And so, we're certainly but we're ready to move on this, and I would think that within a 2-year period, we could be having a dedication out there.
Right. And my other comment is that, I think it's a fantastic idea. And the fact that it's, at that point also, shows the diversity that and inclusiveness that we have in this city. So I think it's fantastic. I like it. And I actually do like the sculpture itself. I think it's great. I was looking at it and I said, wow, that's a fantastic piece of sculpture. So kudos.
I'm a retired school teacher as of this July, and I'm going to keep the educational focus on it as long as I can, for sure. So.
I'll offer a comment. Mr. Krasner, I believe that your question is a good one, but I would call your attention and the commission's attention to the Tinner Hill as an example, that's a southern gateway, and yet we're honoring Tinner Hill, what the role that the African American community made to our area, and as we just saw a second ago, the rural chapters of the NCAA. No, not NCAA, NAACP. But, you know, that, you know, each of our gateways, north, south, east, and west, is going to have a kind of a unique opportunity to show a facet of the city. And so together, we've got, you know, a unique message. And Ms. Teets, your suggestion that we really reach out to 24-hour fitness, I think is right on the money. But the day we did our site visit up there, and I took a ton of pictures, there wasn't one car in that parking lot. And I don't know, you know, whether there's different hours, but
No, it isn't used that much, it really isn't, but during peak times after work and some on the weekend, the staff will park back there because
Okay.
the front line will fill. But
I
just
don't know if every spot's taken.
No, I don't think every spot is taken. But I'm just saying, like, I think it would naturally occur that people would use those parking spots that are outside the site, and I just think it's good to have a good relationship
Yeah.
before that would happen, you know.
As a part of that, there was a provision for a power source up there. There's a 20-amp circuit that goes up there and has an easement, so the ability to light the site is possible, you know, for whatever is up there.
Any other comments?
I think, I think it's a good idea, and, you know, I think definitely I would favor the planning commission giving guidance that we think this is something that should proceed. And fun fact, the recently appointed new ambassador to Vietnam is a city resident, Dan Crittenbrink, so you should talk to him before he ships out.
So I have one question, and the question has to do with, I remember you were talking about a document that you needed from us. Is it
some kind of
a
a letter.
site plan?
Right, just something like this, my letter, you know, just some kind of with the city in letterhead on it,
Thank-
stating that we're working to do this project in
That-
conjunction with the city.
Wouldn't that
I
come
don't-
from city council?
This shows it's a legitimate project.
Right. Yeah, but I think that has to come from council, right?
Yeah.
Not from us.
Yeah, so, you know, I want to mirror what most of the commissioners have said. I think this is a great idea. This is a very important community, a part of our community, both the veterans and the Vietnamese population. Eden Center is a hugely important part of our economic driver here in the city, and it's a wonderful thing to recognize them. My only concern is, as Mr. Krasner said, as the gateway to the city. I remember the site plan and what those signs looked like that said, you know, welcome to Falls Church. They were, you know, sort of brick and inset into the ground. I just don't know what the process is where, you know, it appears you're the first to raise your hand and say, we have a plan and we have a design and we want to move forward, and that seems fantastic. I just don't know, as a gateway portion, is that how it works? If there is, because of its location, there has to be a process where we say, is there an opening of ideas to this spot? I mean, I think it's perfect, obviously, being right by the Eden Center. It just makes sense. So I don't have a problem with it at all. But as the gateway location, it is the only thing that gives me pause, as this was not sort of the vision that was put into the site, or as part of the site plan, it was not something that looked like this, that's all.
That's right.
So now that there is someone sort of raising their hand and say, I want to do something there, does that mean we have to open it in a different way because of its location, which is different than what we just heard a few minutes ago? But on its face, I think it's a wonderful idea. I think it recognizes a population that is, again, super important to us, and the veterans and educational. I don't see anything that's problematic, and that land is currently not being used, so let's use it for good use. But I just don't, that's my only hesitation, is I don't know what gateway means in terms of saying I want to be the structure that is at the focal point of the city, and if other people can make claims once this becomes an open process, or maybe it's already been. I just don't really know, so that's the
And
issue.
I think from the planning side, we hope to pursue with Fairfax County, because when we last met talking about Seven Corners intersection, we pointed out that, you know, in our conversations, that piece of Hillwood was supposed to be closed off and become pedestrian and green space. And so I think there's really the potential to have an expanded entrance gateway to the city that's not just cars going by, that would give you additional land to do more.
Has VDOT agreed to
Help
that?
connect.
Has VDOT agreed to closing Hillwood? It's a state, Hillwood is a state route, isn't it?
Well, in our conversation with Tom Bashadny, and it's a part of our support for the Seven Corners plan, that was specifically something we talked about and that they agreed. I think Laura and I were both out there with that discussion. So we're going to reaffirm that, but that's our understanding was that it's a very complex intersection, and that's
Right.
one of its problems and why it doesn't flow very well.
Right. But VDOT
It
would,
also is trying to emphasize moving traffic on Route 50, and Hillwood is not supposed to be a through street from the city's perspective. It's been a...
right, but it's a
problem.
VDOT 300 series road, so you're going to need to, I'm sure you've talked to VDOT.
Except we own our own streets, and so, you know,
But do we control Hillwood,
yes.
even though it's a state,
We have
even though it
both
has a,
sides- we have
even though it
both
has a
sides,
state, it has a state route number on it, even though?
It's, one of the benefits of being a city is we have more control than...
No, I know that, but I'm saying, but
Well, I would
just
hate
like, just like
to
7 and
see
29.
this be delayed because of what the plan is around Seven Corners. I suspect that process will move so much slower than what it sounds like this
Just for what
organization
it's
is
worth,
willing to.
we've had positive, in our discussions with Fairfax County Transportation, it's been very positive with their planning, transportation planning folks, that would not be open. They need to simplify the intersection, needs to flow better, and having so many things come together is one of the reasons it doesn't work very well.
And if the project was in existence and in 5 years from now, they finally came up with a plan, they could include it in whatever
Yeah,
they're doing with the plan.
It's not going to happen tomorrow by any
No.
means, but I think it gives us an opportunity to have more of a presence on that intersection as opposed to being the many roads to Falls Church, which is what it presently is.
No, I agree. I just think that's a separate sort of issue,
Yes.
that this group is, you know, said they're interested. They said they can raise the money. It makes sense as it relates to Eden Center, so I don't want it to be held up because of that. As I said already, my concern is what a gateway location process looks like.
And that's
and-
another thing, because the electricity is also there, we're anticipating that perhaps we can do some kind of a lighting effect whenever it
Yes.
becomes dark. And we would be setting up some kind of a fund, I think, with a local bank that would be willing to, use this money. We'll continue to fundraise on this.
Yeah.
For years to come. We'll continue to add to that fund. And if it comes in the planning and it takes some extra money to move it or do something, we'll come up
Yeah.
with it.
Well, as you heard, we're new to this process as well in terms of the public art, so I'm sure we'll,
So the gateway
work
will
with
see
you.
lights if if it all works out right.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate the presentation, and I think it's a great idea.
And I want to thank Mr. Bruce here for all the work he's been doing with us on it. It's been very helpful to us. He deserves to be recognized.
Not surprising. Okay, thanks again. All right, we're gonna move to the railroad cottages. I appreciate you guys being patient while we work through those public projects.
Ready? Okay.
Hit it.
As you'll recall, you guys saw the special exception in July. The city council approved the resolution on September 11th, and and then the site plan has been submitted and is currently under staff review. We've gotten comments back from most reviewers, which you have. I do want to point out a couple things that have happened since you guys saw it. The city council approved as part of the resolution to include an easement along the southern edge of Railroad Avenue. On their property, they're requesting an easement from the applicant. This is a long-term strategy to get easements all along Railroad Avenue from all the property owners on the south side to further enhance public access, long-term public safety improvement access. The other item is that the license agreement with Nova Parks the language has been reviewed and approved by staff from the city and Nova Parks and the applicant, and basically it's just waiting for signatures at this point. It's been looked at by the board, Nova Parks board, and there were no comments on it. So in terms of the site plan, part of it will include some landscape waivers, which are the same as what was seen in the CDP for the buffers to provide for some of the emergency access turnaround, and then also provide more evergreens instead of canopy trees, and also because of location of the storm sanitary sewer lines. There's a number of voluntary concessions that are required prior to site plan approval. They have either met or are working to meet some of those. I'll just highlight a couple of them. One's the historic commemoration. They are close to finalizing the language that will go on that plaque, and that the location would be at the northwest corner near the entrance to the development. They're looking at the electric vehicle charging station they have shown on the site plan as being under the carport. And then the improvements to the western gateway at the shed area on the trail, and then some of the replacement landscaping along Railroad Avenue. They are working with Nova Parks to finalize those plans. As a process update, the Architectural Advisory Board will be looking at this on October 4th, this Wednesday. Tree Commission on October 18th, and we are anticipating bringing it back to you all for a final action in November. So at this point, the applicant's here to answer any questions, and I can as well.
Okay, thank you. Let me understand what we're trying to accomplish tonight, because I'm honestly a little confused. We have heard this presentation, or looked at this site, I should say, on numerous occasions. I looked at the site plan as submitted to us this evening, and it looks incredibly similar to what we've seen before, yet we're not asked to be taking any action this evening as a work session. So what is it that we are reviewing? Because I feel like this group is really familiar with what we're got in front of us. So we're asking questions again on the same thing, or I'm just missing it, what I'm supposed to be doing, or the commission's supposed to be doing on something that we have heard literally.
Some of this, I think, Mr. Chairman, is an update because the Planning Commission heard this, and then it went to City Council, and then they ultimately approved the special exception.
But
So following
as
that-
they approved it as recommended, correct?
With a few little tweaks on some of the,
The main thing was the addition of the easement along the southern edge, and then getting an update on the license agreement with Nova Parks, getting that finalized.
Getting that finalized, right. I
So
know that was
there
a big
There
concern.
aren't big changes, but there has been a site plan submitted. There will be a consolidation, subdivision. All of these will come before you. We typically have a work session in advance so that if there are questions that need to be asked, they can be looked at. We are beginning to get staff comments in. The applicants were very interested in finding time to let you know their plans on the site plan. We're going to get a very busy fall, and so this seemed like an opportunity that they were ready to fill you in on their application. And so we thought, given everything else that's coming
Okay.
forward, this was a good opportunity.
So it's important we follow the procedure for sure and come back to us. I'm just going to turn it over to the commission. I feel like I got this and have voted accordingly on what was here. Anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I have
go
a
for it.
question. And the question doesn't have to do with the site plan, it just has to do with the lease agreement, which you gave us. The terms are pretty harsh, I thought. There were certain places in which, I personally wouldn't agree to, like NRVA, or NV, or the people who own the
Nova Parks.
the Nova Parks people were saying that they could come in and approve everything that is put in place, at will, with 6 months' notice.
Right.
Give the person about a year before, so that they can.
That was the original request from
Yeah.
us, was a year. That's typically much more than they normally do. They normally do 30 days is their standard.
Okay. Yeah, there was that one, and another part of it which I thought was also pretty harsh. So where does that put us if we sign this? I'm assuming that the city of Falls Church is the one going to be signing this, right? This
It'll
agreement?
be the three parties, Nova Parks, the city, and the licensee, which is the applicant.
Okay.
Basically, and how that's written is the licensee initially is, the applicant is responsible for doing all the installation, construction installation. Once it's in, it'll be turned over essentially to the city for maintenance.
So hypothetically, if that happens, what happens to the site? The project's already built. And that improvement was done so a fire truck would be able to go down that street. What happens then?
All the on-site improvements on the site will remain. A new fire hydrant, all the homes will be sprinklered, cementitious siding, and that is also one of the other reasons the city is looking to obtain easements all along the southern edge of Railroad. In case that does happen. We have been told by Nova Parks they do not anticipate needing that area, but this is, they cannot grant permanent easements on their land. So that's a standard condition.
Can it be negotiated in such a way that it's not too, I mean, I was reading and I was saying if I was the person who was supposed to sign this, I'd be hard pressed to sign something as harsh as this. I mean, I think they're being inflexible. So I hope they will be flexible to renegotiate this, because it's really, it's tough.
No. I mean, we went through this, they can speak to it, but we knew this was a risk just from asking this question along. I mean, my personal view, and I said at the time, is if there's a fire, I suspect a truck will get there. That's my view of it. But it does, my understanding is Nova Parks is not willing to make any exceptions to this entire 44 miles, so.
Excuse me, I just thought I'd take a minute. Bob Young, 608 Timber Lane. I'm the applicant, as you all know. I think it's important to understand that Nova Parks cannot legally do more than they're already doing.
Yep.
They're doing the maximum. Wyatt Shields has been deeply involved in this. The planning department has been deeply involved in it. We have as well. The discussions have taken place over many months, maybe over a year. So the main point is they can't do more than they're doing. Their board has weighed in, and we have 2 representatives. The city has 2 representatives who support it. It's one of these kind of legal things where the probability of them withdrawing it relates solely to the widening of the trail. They plan to widen the trail someday in the next 20 to 25 years on the other side of Broad Street. That is on the, I guess that would be the northern side of the bridge. And for obvious reasons, that's where they're stopping, because they'd have to widen the bridge. And that's a very expensive proposition that nobody's willing to. So the time frame here, if they were to ever get to it, would be 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road. Now, I sat, the planning director sat, Carly was there. We had a large meeting with the Park Authority, several members, and we measured out with them if they were to widen the trail to make it a double trail, it still would not impact on those 6 feet. It just wouldn't. So from a realistic point of view, understanding that they have their legal, and it's all wrapped up in the federal government, and how the property was transferred, it's just realistically not going to happen that they're going to take it back. So is that 100%? Absolutely not. Kind of 99, in my opinion.
Yep, Mr. Krasner.
I think everyone on the planning commission, we received a letter from a neighbor. And I don't see anything in the site plan dealing with construction, staging. And wouldn't we typically have a sheet or 2 or 3?
Then the voluntary concessions that requiring one of those, that
Correct.
prior to us issuing any demolition or building permits, they'll have to come in.
Shouldn't that be in the site plan, though? Wouldn't it be better to have a sheet in the site plan or 2 or 3 sheets that lays out the construction phasing, the staging of materials, the soil stock, I mean, everything. I mean, wouldn't that be better to have it in the site plan? That'd be
You're
my
suggesting having a
Having
sheet
it-
that would be part of the site plan that would illustrate what's talked about in the VC, in the VCs?
Yeah, I think it's typically how I've seen past VCs is it's done as part of, prior to issuing any building or demolition.
Right, but
permits
wouldn't,
on the site.
well, I think it would give the neighbors some comfort.
It would, but.
Give the neighbors some comfort to have it graphically depicted on a sheet in the site plan. I don't see what the harm is in that. And I know it's done often in other jurisdictions.
Well, honestly, I've never seen it done. Part of the problem is construction's a dynamic process. Things change. The weather changes, the order in which materials are coming on the site. In this case, it becomes even more complicated because the neighbors next door are about to start construction, and the neighbors next door to them are about to start
Well, you can't
construction.
control that, but I'm saying for the construction that you're going to do. For the construction, not, you can't control what other folks do, but
Well,
what you're
but
going
there's
to
an
do.
interaction effect inevitably.
Right,
The
but you can
neighbors have-
control where your trucks and deliveries, how they're handled. You can control where your contractors and subs park. You can control how materials are delivered, times of day. I mean, I just don't see how a sheet with some notes and some diagrams to lay out an overall framework for how you plan to manage the site and access onto this property. I don't see the harm in that.
We can absolutely do it. There is a tradition and a requirement in the voluntary concessions
Right.
that we meet with the city, lay out a plan for the city staff, get all the different actors involved, including the neighbors, to make sure when we have 3 construction sites going, our biggest concern is that the contractors for the guys next door who have no place to park, no place to park, are going to park on our site. So we need to get all that sorted out. We would be happy to put a sheet in that in general addresses where people are going to park, all the kinds of things you talked about. We wouldn't have a problem with that, but it would have to be at a pretty general level. And again, the staff, all the projects I've ever done, we've had a very long, usually series of meetings with staff over exactly those issues. That's what the city requires, whether it's in the VCs or not.
Sure, I mean, there's some, you have to admit, there are some unique considerations on the street, given the access here. There, there's some peculiarities to this site and to accessing this site that maybe other sites in the city didn't have, as far as, other, I mean, access really comes down to it. I mean, just the way the site has to be accessed. And when you're dealing with the kind of equipment, all the dump trucks that are going to be coming when you start construction, I don't know. I just feel like having some type of overall staging type of, schematic could be helpful. I don't know.
We will certainly have that, whether it's part of the site plan or not, but if that's
I know
something the
some of
staff
that
wants.
was done with Kensington, for example, how material arrives and departs, and
And
we
for
have a lot of tight sites, so it's.
Northgate, too.
I mean, this is why we're having this work session.
Right,
too,
I
is
mean,
to
I think
hear
it should be
from-
part of the site
from
plan.
From the commission concerns you may have, so this is exactly why we're doing this right now.
Hi, I'm Antoinette with Walter Phillips. So in general,
Hmm.
I know this site, there are also the neighbors have specifically asked, but in general, we don't put the construction management plan in the site plan, because a lot of times, the contractor isn't actually on board yet until we're near site plan approval. And so a lot of times, it kind of depends on what they help a lot to figure out how they're going to manage the site and where they need to route from and understanding all of that. So that's why we end up not putting it in the site plan.
No, I know, but this site has unique considerations, unlike many other sites. And that's why I thought maybe to do things a little differently here, there might be some justification to deviate from your normal practice.
Right, but yeah, so the contractor just has a lot more insight on what they can accomplish.
Right, but you're working with a developer who's built many projects, has some idea about construction, so.
Yep.
Yeah, that's all.
Anything else, Mr. Stevens?
Yeah, I have a question on the Earthcraft certification. Will that be done individually for each of the 10 cottage homes and the group home?
The answer is yes. Each one of them will have to be individually certified. We were told today by Paul Ferguson, who's the clerk, but is involved with Earthcraft, the clerk of the Board of Supervisors in Arlington, that Earthcraft has changed their name, and I don't remember what the new name is, but Veridian. It's now called Veridian. But yes, to answer your question directly, each of them will have to have their own certification.
Glad to hear
All
that.
11 structures.
Right.
Anyone else? All right, I'm comfortable. I'm good. So, thank you.
And I guess one question is, when do we think this will be coming forward to the commission for, in terms of the site plan action?
When? Oh,
Yeah.
Thinking, yeah, tomorrow. I'm thinking probably November. I'm not sure which meeting
Did you say
yet.
November
Should
2nd? Didn't we already hear that? Or that,
November 2nd.
I got that wrong?
Our first, November 6th is the first planning commission. I think October 4th is,
Oh, well, November 2nd was like
AAB?
COG meeting.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. Okay. No, you said, someone said November it's coming before, you thought it was coming before us.
Right. So this is good timing in that, we've got we're collecting additional staff comments. So we've had the benefit of your comments, and if you have others, we can pass those on as well. But we'd hope to get it to final site plan in November.
Okay, we didn't offer many, but hopefully that helps. Yeah, it's coming
Yes,
back.
it is coming back.
Yeah. All right, thank you. This work session is complete. Have a good night. Go Redskins.